Hello, I'm Mike Blume, and in this video series I wish to talk about Jews against Zionism. I came across a fascinating website on the internet, JewsAgainstZionism.com, and it holds some information that sincere Christians really need to understand and consider when talking about Israel in the Middle East and the Zionist state that was established in 1948. Zionism has to be understood properly, and it's defined as follows. Zionist ideology holds that the Jews are a people or a nation like any other and should gather together in a single homeland. Zionism was self-consciously the Jewish analog of Italian and German national liberation movements of the 19th century. And the term Zionism was apparently coined in 1891 by the Austrian publicist Nathan Birnbaum. And he described this new ideology using that term, but it was used retroactively to describe earlier efforts and ideas to return the Jews to their homeland for whatever reasons. And it's applied to evangelical Christians who want the people of Jewish religion to return to Israel in order to hasten the second coming of Jesus Christ. Christian Zionism is also used to describe any Christian support for Israel. Now, I first want to say that there's nothing wrong with the Jewish people themselves. Anti-Semitism, hatred against the Jews is ungodly and unchristian and outright devilish. But to understand what God was trying to tell us concerning prophecies to the nation of Israel and whether or not that was fulfilled in 1948 when a Zionist Israel state was established is another thing. You see, there are a group of Orthodox Jews who so tenaciously hold faith in the Old Testament law of God, who call themselves True Torah Jews. Their website address, as I mentioned, is JewsAgainstZionism.com. They're a precious people and they highly regard the God of their fathers, although they may have missed the truth that Jesus Christ is their long-awaited Messiah. But these Jews have made a statement that all Christians ought to take to heart. Traditional Jews are not Zionists, quote unquote. And then they go on to say, although there are those who refuse to accept the teachings of our rabbis and will continue to support the Zionist state, there are also many who are totally unaware of the history of Zionism and its contradictions to the beliefs of true Torah Jews. And that's on the index page of JewsAgainstZionism.com. The focus of this video is to inform you as a Christian how to properly view Zionism in light of what these true Torah Jews have to say. They reflect the proper view that a Jew should have in regards to their homeland in the Middle East, and that ought to influence us Christians as to how to properly perceive them. And again, my focus is to determine whether or not the Zionist establishment of Israel in 1948 in the Middle East is a fulfilled prophecy of God. I often discuss the shocking facts of dispensationalism and wonder how that doctrine ever came to be accepted so widely as it is, considering the ridiculous extents to which dispensationalism juggles and jumbles the scriptures around. But dispensationalism is a deception of the highest kind, and although there are many sincere Christians who adhere to it, it needs to be understood, and these Christians need to be educated and informed as to the true nature of dispensationalism. It proposes that it has proved itself true and correct by the institution of the independent state of Israel in 1948, after the doctrine was created in 1830 and promoted by such men as John Darby and C.I. Schofield and Clarence Larkin. Once again, let's go over what dispensationalism is. The teaching proposes that God has dispensed several covenants in the earth, beginning with the simple command to Adam to not eat of the forbidden fruit of the garden. Each dispensation, and there are supposed to be 7 of them, ends with a judgment before God gives to man the next covenant. The teaching claims that there are to be 7 before the end of the world occurs. And we're allegedly in the 6th dispensation called grace, and this will be followed by one more called the kingdom or the millennial reign. It became popular during the 1800s and the early 1900s and is held today by many conservative Protestants. This teaching takes the 70 weeks of Daniel in Daniel chapter 9 and inserts an unbiblical gap of centuries between the 69th week and the 70th week, the last 2 weeks. And this is when the church age allegedly occurs. During the 70th week of Daniel, they teach that God will specifically deal with the nation of Israel to bring it to a national salvation. And in this national salvation, Israelites who have faith in Jesus Christ during that time will inherit the promised role as the theocratic covenanted kingdom promised to the nation in Old Testament prophecy. Now the last part that I just mentioned, dealing with Israel inheriting the promised theocratic government, is where dispensationalism finds its joy in observing the development of Zionism. They believe that God has gathered Israel to their homeland in fulfillment of prophecy. But as the Jews who oppose Zionism will tell you, God had nothing to do with Zionism, since it is actually trading the Jewish desire to serve God under the old covenant law for a nationalistic desire to simply have a nation of their own. You see, Zionists in Israel are for the most part not even serving God according to the Old Testament law. These Jews against Zionism say that we cannot have a land of our own until we do obey the law of God according to prophecies and commandments such as those in Deuteronomy chapter 30. Zionists are actually repeating the same mistake Israel made in Samuel's day to a degree, by wanting a nation like other nations around them. God told Samuel they actually rejected God as their king in doing that. So we've got Christians today who support something as being of God when true Torah-keeping Jews realize it has nothing to do with God. One Christian Zionist website made this statement as to what Christian Zionism is. Quote, a movement, largely among Gentile Christians, supporting the right of the Jewish people to return to the promised land, which has, of course, happened right before our eyes during the century, unquote. And that's from ChristianActionForIsrael.org. These Christian Zionists have a prayer on their website, including the phrase, quote, you have kept Israel through everything and you have brought them back, unquote. Meanwhile, true Torah-keeping Jews reject any such involvement of God in Zionism's independent state of Israel. How can people be so blind when the Jews that are strictly living by the Old Testament law look at Zionism and see that it's a facade, it's a fake, and it's a counterfeit, and that it is not a state that originated from God gathering the people to their land? Deuteronomy chapter 30 said, only after Israel repents and turns from their ways and goes again in a lifestyle of living for God according to law will God regather them to their land. And the true Torah-keeping Jews noticed that that did not happen in 1948. And the wonderful thing about it is I've been teaching this very thing, standing on Deuteronomy 30 and showing people that 1948 was not this fulfillment. God had nothing to do with 1948's regathering, according to Deuteronomy 30. God said, only when you turn back to me will I regather you to my land. And most of them aren't even keeping the law of the Old Testament over there. How could that be a fulfillment of prophecy? We've got to stand on the Bible, not what things look like or what things appear like, but according to what the Bible says. What saith the Scriptures?